You know, so many of us first and second generation women feel the struggle of navigating two cultures, particularly when it comes to your identity and who you are. Are you this culture or that culture? In this video, I'm going to share some tips to help you navigate your two cultures, as well as share some personal stories that have helped me. All right, let's jump in. Identity struggles is really when there's a conflict between two cultures. So if you were raised in a family with diverse cultures, more than one, and I'm saying two, but it could be three or four or whatnot. But in this instance, I'm saying two, and the clash between those two cultures. So for instance, in my life, like I mentioned in the last video, my parents are Colombian, but I was born and raised here. So that cultural clash can be like differences in culture from their like upbringing and country of origin versus my upbringing, country of origin, which obviously was influenced by them. But clearly there was going to be some clashes, specifically now that I'm living in a westernized country. And so really how that informed or needing to navigate those cultural clashes. Like one thing that really comes to mind, an example in my life, is growing up, it was really common for the girls around me to do sleepovers, and like they did that. That was just a thing. It was part of, I think, American culture. And my parents were really not pro sleepovers. They were not for sleepovers. That culturally was just not something you did. They didn't really trust me going to someone else's house. Even if they knew the parents, it just really was not something we did. I don't think I was able to do a sleepover until like I was really a late teen. And this was someone that my parents knew really, really, really well. And so again, that's just like one small example of a cultural clash. So another way that this can really impact identity struggles is this challenge related to never feeling like you fully belong in any culture. So you don't really fully believe that you belong in this culture or that culture because you're a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You were raised with some of this, but maybe not fully. And this is something that I have really struggled with throughout my life, and probably something that that still shows up for me, this feeling out of place. So for instance, I really notice that when I walk into a room, and depending who's in that room, I will really feel out of place. So if I walk, for example, I've been many instances where I'll go to, let's say, a family or even a friend's party or whatever situation where everyone is like really Hispanic or Latina, like they are like, that's their, they're immigrants or that's just their culture. I really start to feel like, wow, I'm really Americanized. I feel it in terms of my language. I do speak Spanish, but I'm really conscious of that. And it's funny because even I noticed like this joke that I would always say, oh yeah, I'm a gringa, and gringa means like white. And so like kind of me calling myself out. And I really noticed that's kind of like a protective thing, like a defensive mechanism. So like I'm calling myself out so no one else calls me out. And I'm really trying to let that go. But so like me noticing like how conscious that I'm not really fully Hispanic, right? Like I'm just like kind of fake or a cop out. But then on the flip side, then I also noticed this sense when I walked into many situations, particularly in school, in graduate school. Luckily, I'm in South Florida. I went to school down here, so it's pretty diverse. But even so, there was definitely instances either in jobs or certain situations where either it felt like I was much more aware of my culture. I was aware of like, oh, wow, like there's a lot of Americans here and I'm like Hispanic, or a lot of times instances in certain jobs when I would be the only one that spoke Spanish. So even though I don't consider myself like fully Hispanic, I was like, oh, well, you are, I don't want to say choking Spanish because it wasn't that, like you're the only one that speaks Spanish. So you just are taking the Spanish caseload, or your Spanish is good enough to work with people. So again, it's a sense of like not fully belonging in any which way. Again, just noticing at times is feeling like less than and doubting yourself. I also say that I'm not necessarily sure if it had a direct impact on imposter syndrome, but that's something that I've really struggled with, imposter syndrome. And I wonder if this did have a little bit, and just this overall doubting myself, maybe not feeling really secure, my culture, my identity, or who I am. And so maybe that also showed up in this at times flavor of imposter syndrome. Can really show up is this sense of like confusion or even like an identity crisis, especially like as you're going into like these formative years, like teenagers, young adult, where you start to really question or feel like, who am I? What do I want to stand for? What's important to me? And at times feeling really confused or torn, like which culture do I want to navigate, or kind of which culture do I really want to incorporate into my life, or how do I make it my own, and feeling really overwhelmed by it. Or even to a certain degree, right? Noticing at times, especially in my formative years, if I was around a certain group of people, would I like maybe my Hispanic side would show up more or not again. And so having to figure out what that looks like for me now and making it my own. Also lead to just overall emotional exhaustion, just again the toll of needing to navigate these two cultures, identity, and again in all these different contexts, because again your identity goes with you, and how you relate to who you are, how you make sense of that, right, might be different in one setting or another, but you're still taking that with you. And so the awareness that you're kind of having this extra toll of trying to balance, like, okay, how do I incorporate this part of my identity in this role or this area of my life? How do I incorporate this? And especially if you're kind of balancing these two different cultures. Let me know in the comments below. Is this something that you've struggled? Like, what has this identity struggle look like for you? Comment below and see how we can all learn or relate to each other's experiences. Tips to help you navigate this. Number one, embrace your story. So how cool and unique that you come from multiple cultures, and the fact that all these cultures, like all these pieces, make up you, and that there's no one else like you, regardless of your culture or whatnot, even if you come from one. But either way, I really want you to start to lean into this, embracing the fact that that's unique and it makes you special, and that can be really cool. I think this other piece, it's like practice the storytelling as well. Like practice telling your story in a way that makes you feel proud. Like figure out how you can make sense of it in a way that then you step into a room, regardless of the room, whether you're feeling out of place or not, and you don't have to listen to those thoughts because you've practiced kind of leaning into this place of feeling really proud and confident about your upbringing, your roots, and the fact that you do come from multiple heritages, and that's made you who you are today. Next tip is about celebrating both cultures. So whether that's the language, the food, traditions, whatever the case is, find ways to celebrate both. So thinking about like your family's culture, are there things that you guys practiced growing up that you really want to continue to incorporate into your life? Maybe that also means like visiting that country of origin, learning more now as an adult and figuring out what you like or don't like. It might also mean like embracing certain cultures that maybe your family didn't do because they also forgot as the generations passed. So figuring out what that looks like, also your new culture, right? Like how do you want to embrace that? What does that look like? So for instance, a lot of immigrants come here, they're not used to celebrating Thanksgiving, and that's a new way that they maybe incorporate it. Like how do they want to celebrate Thanksgiving or not? Or what does that look like? So figuring out ways that feel authentic to you and incorporating both of these cultures into your life. This is all about getting to know yourself. So this can also include like creating an identity statement, exploring some values, doing some journaling, like all types of self-reflection activities you can incorporate here. But ultimately, I just want you to spend some time getting to know yourself. And so like without this pressure to conform or this guilt or feeling less than, kind of spend some time reflecting on like, what is it that you like and how's that informed by one or both cultures or multiple cultures or whatnot. So spend some time figuring out what that looks like. And again, you can even write this down, like what does your identity statement look like, reflecting who you are, your upbringing, what's important to you, your values, how you're going to incorporate that into your life. And even to a certain degree, if you're a parent, how you're going to incorporate that or instill those values into your kids, or what cultural pieces do you want to really instill into your kids. This next step is all about being able to move through some of the challenges that show up for you. So being able to like notice and name like these common perpetrators of like inadequacy or pressure to conform or feeling out of place. So like the more you can like notice like, oh, there's that culprit again. It's showing up here because I'm about to get promoted and I don't feel like I'm good enough. Or like, oh, here's that culprit because I'm going to a family event and everyone seems to call me out on my language or when I say something wrong, like, oh, I know that makes me feel uncomfortable. So like noticing those culprits, all right, and then having some set tools that are going to help you move through that. So like whatever is in your coping toolbox that you can turn to, self-compassion, self-soothing, grounding, seeking support, being able to move through those thoughts, whatever the case is, that you can have a toolbox of things that you can turn to when those struggles show up. This last tip is all about fostering connections with like-minded people. So find other people in your life who also understand kind of this identity struggle or being raised from multiple cultures and how they make sense of it. So finding those people, whatever they look like, and if you're not really surrounded because you're maybe in an area where that's not really common, even online, find like virtual online support groups of people that really get it and understand. I mentioned this a little bit before, but it's so important to really kind of combat the sense of isolation or feeling out of place, that there's other people that really get and understand what you go through. And they don't even have to be from the same exact culture, that maybe they understand this clash of being from multiple cultures and what that looks like. If this video resonated with you, stay tuned for my next video where I go through fear of judgment, how you can move through the sense of feeling judged and how that may show up in all these sneaky ways. All right, guys, and like I always say, I encourage you to continue nurturing your mind, body, and soul, whatever that looks like for you. Thanks.